Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal TV's live coverage of the third and final day of the BRICS 2023 annual summit that is coming to you from the Sandton Convention Center. Now, of course, part of many of our interviews we've been trying to get various media houses just to get their take on it. Let me bring in Anya Parampil. She's from the gray zone in the United States of America. Anya, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here in Sandton.
All right, Anya, talk to us about what is the gray zone. You did say it's an alternative media, but alternative media in what sense?
Well, considering we're based in Washington, D.C., I would say it's alternative, critical view of U.S. foreign policy by Americans who would like to see their government engage more sensibly with the world.
Yes.
And so I've been quite focused on studying or covering multipolarity and particularly efforts in Latin America to combat the effects of sanctions and US-led economic warfare. And that eventually led me here to the BRICS Summit because it was clear that this was going to be a summit like no other and a moment like never before in the evolution of the world to hopefully something more cooperative.
Anya, the United States and South Africa in the last few months, things have been absolutely tense with regards to the relationship. There's been calls by the opposition parties, some of them for the U.S. Ambassador Ruben Brigady to be sent back because of allegations of the Lady R of Russia. How does United States view South Africa at this moment with its non-alignment policy in the Russia-Ukraine war?
I would venture to say, unfortunately, that the current U.S. government sees South Africa the way it sees most of the world, which is as a country that it would like to assert its authority over and prevent from developing a sovereign, independent economy and even foreign policy in terms of which countries South Africa can and can engage with.
Yeah.
The United States likes to control every aspect. That's what it means to be an ally, right? Not necessarily a partner. And I noticed that in the lead up to this summit, the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, actually came to South Africa, and I was very concerned to see that because this is a woman who, her reputation is where she comes, she's trying to bring some instability and even regime change. She was the architect of the 2014 Maidan coup in Ukraine that led to the current war.
Yeah.
Her husband is the infamous neocon Robert Kagan, who helped author the Project for a New American Century, which was supposed to describe the 21st century as a century of American and transatlantic dominance. And of course, South Africa and many other countries were part of that puzzle to them, and it didn't work out the way they thought. And so I really don't think the people in Washington who are running the government understand. They have a colonial and imperial mentality where they cannot understand that South Africa, India, and so many other developing countries in the world are grown up. They're going to want to assert their own economic sovereignty and buck the IMF kind of neo-colonial model of development.
I was going to ask that because we've seen America just post 9/11. There was the rhetoric of anti-Muslim, and it was of course pushed through by many of the Hollywood movies that were being made. The rhetoric has now changed to anti-Russia. It's always been there, of course, with an anti-Soviet take on things, and now, of course, anti-China with regards to the Americans wanting to infiltrate Taiwan. Are the American people seeing America in a different light? Because I would like to think that post 9/11 America was, or would say Captain America and its role of being the strong nation. Now in 2023, do the US citizens see America quite different as maybe a country that wants to assert its dominance too much and it becomes exhausting in the way they do their things?
Yes, and they're especially realizing themselves that the Republic is often the first sacrifice or the first victim of the empire. our leaders not only have carried out these policies such as the criminal war in Iraq, the just horrific destruction of North Africa through the removal of, and again, murder of Muammar Gaddafi. Americans understand that those policies have inflicted unimaginable pain on populations around the world, but in some ways, from the American perspective, what's more significant at this stage is that I think the American public has realized the same elite that is doing that abroad is leaving them to suffer at home, whether it's with high food prices, gas prices, unimaginable, unprecedented rates of poverty and homelessness in all major American cities. Go to New York, go to San Francisco, go to Miami, any of the cities, Los Angeles, that were regarded as great American vibrant cities today, and you will see a very shocking picture. It's something like out of a nightmare, honestly. And there's a tent city across the street from the U.S. State Department. So Americans, they realized, they got over the just believing everything their government said in terms of propaganda and war because they realized the wars were lies. But they also, I do believe, are starting to make the connection, especially the Ukraine war has laid it bare, because nobody can even tell anyone how many billions and billions of dollars we've spent there. And even now, conservatives or libertarian people who would usually be critics of government spending are saying, why aren't we spending that money on our own people?
And Joe Biden continues to back the war in Ukraine. The next question I want to ask is regards to BRICS, Anya. We've seen Saudi Arabia join. Very powerful in terms of oil output. We've seen Iran, who's always been a rival to the United States because of its holding of nuclear weapons. If America's looking at the powers that have joined now, and I'm specifically talking of those two, do you feel that they have a sense of concern that the BRICS bloc is starting to make growth that even they did not imagine was going to happen?
I think they are starting to question the percentages, which percentage of the international oil wealth does BRICS control, or do the G7, G20 aligned countries control? And the whole point kind of the G7 countries is that they don't have the wealth. They've gone out to take it from everybody else. And so finally the countries that were subject to neo-colonial, neoliberal development for decades, they've developed these fantastic diplomatic corps and ministries where for decades they've been working to build something where they could actually claim their true independence. And that's what they're seeing now. And the point about Saudi Arabia and Iran is really, really key in terms of what I can imagine the U.S. elite might be thinking about right now, because they truly, again, it gets back to what I was saying about how they view people with such a reductive mind. They thought that they could just exploit religious or ideological tension between Saudi Arabia and Iran indefinitely in order to prevent the region from uniting, just as the imperial forces have done in Pakistan too, or many other countries in the world. And eventually what we're seeing is the natural flow of humanity is that countries are eventually going to understand that their ideological differences are not as important as their mutual interest in surviving and just having a sovereign country, a sovereign economy. The U.S. will not allow for it, and I think even Saudi Arabia knows that their day will come. If the West decides they want to turn their back on Saudi Arabia, they will undermine their sovereignty and try to put in whatever kind of government they want. So everyone knows, I think, in the world, the West can turn on you on a dime.
Yes.
And so you just have to be secure and make your own independent force. And of course, they're very concerned, I think, about what the long-term Iran and Saudi alignment, what that means for really the U.S.'s only genuine ally in the region,
Yeah.
Israel.
It's going to be interesting how things are going to change, and we will, of course, watch with great interest. Anya, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV and sharing it from an American perspective.
My honor.
Yeah. That is Anya Parampil from the Gray Zone based in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. Again, do stay tuned to Hilaal TV as we continue to bring you live updates from the closing parts of the 2023 BRICS Summit.